What if the mystical whispers you've encountered on Instagram, words attributed to Rumi, were, in truth, echoes only loosely tethered to a 13th century Persian mystic? What if the spiritual balm you felt was a balm shaped more by modern desires than by the poet himself? This question opens a gateway to a complex journey, one that spans centuries, crosses continents, and wades into profound cultural contradictions. In today's world, Rumi's poetry is everywhere. His words adorn coffee mugs and tattoos, are quoted at weddings and funerals, and are beloved by seekers across spiritual traditions. But beneath the soft glow of his popular lines lies a deeper question. Has the world's embrace of Rumi been an act of appreciation? Or has it, perhaps unknowingly, veered into cultural appropriation? Welcome to the Unfolding Journey YouTube channel, a space where we look beyond the surface, ask difficult questions, and explore the layered truths of culture, spirituality, and human connection. Here, we take our time with the stories that matter, unraveling them with care and curiosity. In this episode, we delve into the world of Rumi, his life, his faith, his poetry, and the controversial legacy of his translations in the modern West. Rumi's context and spiritual roots. Rumi, or Jalal al-Din Muhammad Baqi, was a 13th century Muslim scholar, jurist, and mystic. He was not simply a poet of love and longing. He was a devout follower of Islamic theology and Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam that seeks divine love through spiritual practice and inner purification. His poetry is anchored in tawhid, the affirmation of divine unity. This concept, so central to Islamic theology, appears again and again in his verses, often expressed through metaphors of burning, longing, and union with the divine. His language draws richly on Quranic imagery and hadith, and he composed in the tradition of Islamic scholasticism. Rumi taught in madrasas, engaged in jurisprudence, and led a spiritual community deeply committed to the teachings of Islam. He once described his magnum opus, the Masnavi, as the unveiler of the Quran, a poetic commentary not only on sacred scripture, but on the inner mysteries of the soul. To separate Rumi from Islam is to remove the very soil from which his wisdom grew. Cosmopolitan spirit and accessibility. Yet even as Rumi's poetry was steeped in a specific religious and cultural context, it also speaks to the universal human condition. Love, loss, union, separation, divine ecstasy, and the longing of the soul, these are themes that transcend borders. Rumi's words have been embraced by people across the world, from Turkey to Iran to the United States. His verses have been translated into dozens of languages. UNESCO even declared 2007 the Year of Rumi, honoring his contribution to global culture and humanistic ideals. His cosmopolitan spirit is part of what makes him so magnetic. He doesn't speak just to Muslims. He speaks to the mystic, the lover, the seeker in all of us. But universality doesn't mean erasure. And therein lies the tension. Western translations and detachments. Much of Rumi's popularity in the English-speaking world can be traced to one name, Coleman Barks. A poet and translator from the United States, Barks helped introduce Rumi to a wide Western audience through his best-selling interpretations. But there's a catch. Coleman Barks doesn't read Persian. His translations were based on previous English renderings, and they often omit references to Islam, the Quran, or religious context. These adaptations, while beautiful in their own right, offer a version of Rumi that is palatable to Western, often secular, readers. What's left is a kind of spiritual Rumi, divorced from his religious identity. And it worked. Barks' versions of Rumi became wildly popular. They've been quoted by Oprah Winfrey, used in Hollywood films, referenced by musicians like Coldplay, and shared by millions online. Yet critics argue that this version of Rumi is not truly Rumi at all. It's a brand, a poetic product, flattened for consumption. Reducing Rumi, commodification or connection. This brings us to the heart of the dilemma. When Rumi's poetry becomes a commodity, sold in bite-sized affirmations or printed on merchandise, what gets lost? Scholar Catherine Lofton calls this the social act of consumption. We consume Rumi for inner peace, personal growth, or emotional comfort. But in doing so, we may ignore the outer dimensions of his spiritual world. Rumi's mysticism wasn't just about feeling good. It was about surrendering to the divine, obliterating the ego, and aligning oneself with the sacred. These are demanding, rigorous, religious ideals, not simply therapeutic platitudes. Some thinkers go further, calling this trend a form of spiritual colonialism. It bypasses, erases, and reclaims a spiritual heritage that was never Western to begin with. Rumi becomes a Western sage, not an Islamic mystic, a transformation that reflects deeper patterns of cultural appropriation. Voices from the community. The debate isn't limited to scholars. On platforms like Reddit, readers and poets are raising similar concerns. One user writes, "That Rumi quote, it's probably fake. Rumi is one of the most abused poets in translation at the moment." Another adds, "The universality that many revere in Rumi today comes from his Muslim context. Remove that, and you remove the heartbeat of his message." These voices reflect a growing awareness. Readers are beginning to ask, whose voice are we hearing when we read Rumi? And what does it mean to love his words while erasing his faith? Appropriation versus ethical engagement. To be clear, not all reinterpretations are acts of appropriation. Cultural sharing is natural, and poetry, especially mystical poetry, often transcends linguistic and national boundaries. The poetic form known as the ghazal is one example. It originated in Arabic and Persian but found its way into Urdu, Turkish, and even American poetry. Writers like Adrian Rich and Agha Shahid Ali used the ghazal not to appropriate, but to build bridges across cultures. This is what some scholars refer to as radical hospitality, a way of engaging with another culture that honors its origins, acknowledges its depth, and refuses to extract meaning without understanding. So how do we engage ethically with Rumi's work today? By reading translations that retain his Islamic voice and vision. By naming our sources and understanding the histories behind them. By treating Rumi not as a brand, but as a bridge to something bigger than ourselves. Rumi's poetry continues to resonate because it taps into something eternal. But when we lift his words out of their sacred soil and place them in purely secular pots, we risk distorting the message. Appreciation turns into appropriation when we forget context, erase history, and silence the faith that gave rise to the words. So let us return to Rumi, not just the quotes, but the soul behind them. Let us meet him not only as a poet, but as a mystic, a scholar, a Muslim. Let us listen with humility and curiosity. And let us love Rumi not as a universal meme, but as a deeply rooted tree, one whose branches may reach us, but whose roots are planted in the rich soil of Islamic thought and spiritual discipline. Seek out translations by scholars like Jawed Mojaddedi, who maintain Rumi's religious integrity. Take time to understand the historical and cultural dimensions of the texts you love. Love Rumi, yes, but love him with awareness, with reverence, and with responsibility. If you've journeyed with me through these layers, thank you. If this exploration has opened new questions or offered new insights, please consider subscribing to the Unfolding Journey channel. Here, we go beyond surface impressions. We look deeply, question sincerely, and engage with stories, both ancient and modern, that shape the human experience. Subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon to stay with us on this journey through culture, spirit, and meaning. Until next time, keep unfolding.